this is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Ukeme Awakessien Jeter, who is the mayor and council president of Upper Arlington, Ohio. Welcome to the show, Ukeme.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on. Saw the bio, and obviously, there's a lot of questions I need to ask you. Right? I'm a little confused on how you went left and then you went right, but it's okay. I know you did it for a particular reason, and I know someone was guiding you through it. But before we get into all that fun stuff, just give a little bit of information to the listeners about your cultural background and where you grew up.
Sure thing. Well, you nailed the name, so let's start there. We're off to.
I had a good coach. I had a good coach.
As an immigrant to the United States, I mean, it always is cringeworthy when my name gets pronounced. But so starting there, I immigrated to the United States from Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria. I immigrated here for college. I went to the University of Maine, so up north.
Oh, wow.
That's a different whole conversation. But I would say I'd never seen snow a day in my life, and snow sounded intriguing from someone that comes from 2 degrees above the equator. And so I ended up there, started my career as a mechanical engineer, did that for almost a decade, then transitioned to law. So I'm a practicing attorney now. And then just about almost 4 years ago, a couple of circumstances in my life led me to think about public service. And so I ran for office, and at the time didn't know I was doing anything history breaking. I was just trying to make the world a little better for one human being. And my city is about 107 years old. And I ended up making history as the first person of color elected to council. And then earlier this year, January of this year, I got sworn in as mayor. So life's been a wild, a wild ride of unexpected turns and dreams that I didn't even know I had that have been accomplished.
I'm glad you're saying that right there, because I coming from Nigeria, not saying that you weren't thinking like that, but then to end up in Ohio, right? Yeah. And as the mayor, right? So that's like a whole journey that we're hopefully going to get a little bit into and stuff like that. But give a little bit more understanding or a background of just growing up in Nigeria, right? For the individuals, listeners that are like, okay, Nigeria, right? And what were like some of the things that you could share with us, like that were very meaningful with you growing up that actually helped, in your career today?
Well, I grew up in a large family, one of five children. And my parents, of those 5, 4 of us were girls. And so I like to tease that my dad was the original girl dad before I knew what girl dad is, or before Kobe made that term popular. So I grew up in a traditional middle-class family, educated dad that had a high emphasis on education for us.
Okay.
I mean, the periodic table was, my dad's a biochemist, and he's a biochemist and he worked in oil and gas. So, he read the Sunday paper, played Scrabble for fun. I went to math camp. I didn't go to band camp. You can imagine that kind of household. Excellence was expected of me. Doing something right was not enough. You always expected kind of like the extra degree. Okay. And what we did, I went to all girls boarding school, so that also empowered me in a different way. I didn't grow up having any perceived limitations to my gender, which is odd for having grown up in Nigeria, right? Because that was the general noise around you that I didn't really realize till I came out of high school. And that was also kind of part of the dynamics that played into coming to school in the United States. I think my dad was very intent that I never felt limited by my gender to achieve. So, lots of fun memories. My parents had I would say three values or 3 principles in which we grew up: education, excellence, and exposure. So we traveled a lot as a family. We read a lot of newspaper news, like my dad would be the constant, come listen to this news segment. We'll listen to the news segment, and then he'll like, let's talk about what you think, or we'll read the newspaper, and he's like, I expect like a written report on what you read in the newspaper. So that gives you some dynamics.
Wow.
On how I grew up.
Very, very studious. I can see how it got you to this place right here. Shout out to dad. Shout out to dad and mom. They were just dropping. They were dropping the crumbs.
My mom was no joke either. My mom was a like you if you look to her for some grace, you'd be like, yeah, what he said. So I'm like, but it was fun. It was just that excellence was required.
Now, when you came from Nigeria to the States, where did you go first?
Maine.
Directly to
Maine. And so a little fun fact. So I'm third generation American educated. My granddad came to college in the United States. My dad went to college in the United States. But again, these were the men, right? The men in the family, the women weren't sent. And so I'm quote unquote the first woman that my dad said, hey, listen, I just know you'll thrive there and you'll do well. And so that's how I came to the United States. My dad went to college in Bowdoin, which is in Maine.
Yep. Is there a reason for Maine?
So it's funny, my granddad was in DC when he came. My dad went to Maine because he had a full paid scholarship, right? And so that's how he ended up at Bowdoin, great school. Yep. And then when I was coming, I did engineering. So my dad was a biochemist, like I said. So he was science, so he could go to a liberal arts school. So there were only two options for my dad. Because he was in oil and gas, he thought Texas was good, but he didn't give me all of Texas. He just gave me Houston because sometimes he visited there. And then Maine, because he had connections in Maine, having gone to college there. And like I said, I hadn't seen snow a day in my life before, and I'm adventurous and I like experiencing different things. And so I thought if I was going to leave Nigeria and not know a single soul, it might as well be fun to be in an environment that was completely different than where I was. And I always felt like Houston was kind of like a mini Nigeria because it was warm and it had a lot of Nigerians there. So that's how I ended up in Maine.
And my thought process, or something that I really need to dive into, like obviously, despite the snow, I can assume it was a massive cultural shock right there. Because I think the listeners are really like, hold on now, Nigeria and Maine, right? So just give us a little bit of an understanding of how did you feel stepping onto that campus, first and foremost, coming directly from Nigeria, not knowing if you were going to fit in, obviously snow and all the other factors, but just culturally fitting in. Did you feel like you were able to?
I mean, you nailed it. I don't know that I ever, all the excitement of you're going to college, you don't even think about what you're going to walk into, right? So you nailed it. It was a ginormous culture shock. First of all, no one looked like me. And no one sounded like me, right? But at 18, you don't think or know that till you step in. I always say, I didn't really realize I was Black till I came to college in the United States, right? I don't mean that like I didn't know what my skin color was or anything like that. It just had never been a descriptor used to describe me. I've never had to check it on a box on a form before, just never, right? And so you come to the United States and you're filling out forms and it's like, oh, am I African American? You're like, am I? Well, I'm Black, so there's that aspect. But for the first time, you are, even though you've been Black, I'm Black 365 days a year. It's not something that comes to me. You're now hyper aware of that because there's not a lot of people that look like you. So you have that element. Then you have the element of not a lot of people have encountered people like you too. So there are biases that outwardly and unspoken to you, because what I didn't know is what people have seen on the TV about someone from Africa. And when I say someone from Africa, it's because that's how they lumped it. They didn't think Nigeria, they thought Africa. So all of a sudden, I always felt like when I spoke for an entire continent.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
That's pressure right there.
And it was like, no. I'm from Nigeria. I don't know very much about East Africa, Uganda. I don't know very much about South Africa. Right? I don't know, like North Africa is mostly Islamic. I don't, yeah. But it was hard for people to understand that. And I started to quickly realize that what they saw on TV was very different from how I grew up. I tell this joke, and because this person was dead serious, so it's not even a joke, it was a conversation where it was like, well, where do you guys live? Was the question. I was like, what do you mean, where do we live in Nigeria? In
buildings, houses?
And I was like, in a home, like a house. And it like they couldn't fathom it. They're like a mud house, a tree house. And he said,
whoa.
But it was genuine curiosity.
No, true, 100%. Because
that really threw me because it was so genuine. It was so genuine that I realized I was dealing with educating at the same time, not trying to take on those biases or be angered by them, that they wouldn't know differently, right? And so we had a whole conversation about that. I said, well, I'm a little bit, I'm a jokester. So I said, well, where do you think the American embassy, when the American, we have diplomats in Nigeria. If I live in a mutt or tree house, where do you think the American embassy is? In the tree house or mud house? Like, and you could see the light bulbs go off. It's like what you generally see on TV might not be the whole story.
That is,
so like Chimanda says, the problem with stereotypes is not that they're not true, right? It's just that they're not the whole story. They're not complete. They're just one part of it. So that culture shock was dealing with debunking so many stereotypes, even stereotypes about my intelligence level. Like, how could you know the law of gravity? I was like, what do you don't think the law of gravity is the same whether you learn it in English or whether you learn it in French or whether you learn it in Arabic? You don't think it's the same, right? So it's like dealing with those took a skill, because at 18, you're old enough, but you don't also have the emotional intelligence to articulate or deal with it as well as I think now, almost 3 decades later, I can deal with it.
And the fact that, first and foremost, thank you for sharing that, right? I think that was you nailed it. And I can only imagine what 4 years or the many years that you went to school, how you felt and how you transitioned to things like that. But your personality, something I just realized in that segment, your personality helped you to not like to be known or to be taken as created that stereotype of the angry Black girl, right? Yeah. Just when someone says, where do you live? You could have easily lashed out and caused that interaction to go south. But you took the opportunity to kind of express to people. And sometimes we can't even fault them because what's on TV is what's on TV. What's on social media is what's on social media. And if that's someone's primary source of information, unlike the encyclopedia, unlike the Webster Dictionary or something along those lines, a reliable source or National Geographic, whatever it is, you're relying on Joe Schmo on TV to tell you everyone lives in huts and tree houses. And then before you know it, you're like, well, that's why I'm not going to go to Africa. But not knowing that Africa has so many different places and every place is different. Nigeria is different from Senegal, and Senegal is different from, like you said, Egypt up there, you know what I'm saying? Like different. But again, it is truly sad how people could box people in, and like you said, the whole continent of Africa on your back. So kudos to you for pushing through and making it happen and standing up for the African. Now, growing up, like, so I know you said your father and
biochemist.
Yeah, biochemist. Did you know that you were going to be a potential lawyer? Were you shooting to go for that? Were you shooting, obviously engineer? Were you for those things? Or was it like, look, I'm just going to go wherever life takes me?
Yeah. I always laugh because growing up, my dream was to become a flight attendant.
I mean, you were traveling a lot.
I was traveling a
You
lot.
were traveling a lot. I don't knock you. That's a nice job.
I thought I wanted to be a flight attendant. But you know what's so funny? Oh, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and my daughter said something to me not too long ago that made me stop dead in my trap. She said, Mom, you wanted to be the flight attendant, not the pilot?
Oh, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I see how your daughter moving.
And I, for a second, was just like, wow. But then it had to be so reflective in that moment. You know why I wanted to be the flight attendant and not the pilot? Because I didn't see a female pilot. I saw female flight attendants, and after when I reflected on that question, I said that to her. I said, I actually never crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind to be the pilot of a plane. And you know why I never crossed my mind? Probably because I never saw it. So I say that to say I saw myself in STEM, a couple of reasons, because my dad had exposed me to a female mechanical engineer. Actually, when I started thinking about engineering, because I went, like I said, we did math. Nature, nurture. I was completely nurtured in STEM. I didn't know anything but my math and science and those kind of things. So it was only natural that I was going to end up there because those are all the classes I'd taken. But when I started to think about it, I thought, mechanical engineering, who does that? Like, what does that even look like? I remember my dad inviting a female mechanical engineer over to dinner at the house. So I got to see a female mechanical engineer and chat with her, and kind of knew that there were people like me in the field. So despite what people were saying,
of color?
Huh?
Was she a woman of color?
Yeah, she was Nigerian. A Nigerian female mechanical engineer. And I thought, look, there's someone that can do it. I can do it. So there's a lot of power in becoming what you are because you've seen. Law was never on my mind. There's no lawyers in my family. Most of my family is STEM. So there's no lawyers in my family. But what happened is I got into the field. I was a project engineer, then I was a process engineer. I traveled a lot. I was in consumer products and manufacturing was the space I was in. So when I did projects, I did like new product development, and then we'll travel around to the plants to do the execution.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time, I dealt with a lot of imposter and insecurities in the career, in the sense that I generally was the only in the room. And that got tiring, and the development of me as an engineer was lacking somewhat, because again, there wasn't very many people like me looking out and thinking, where does she go next? Because I was in product development, I worked a lot with lawyers, and those lawyers would help anywhere from environmental to regulatory to business, whatever it was. Again, you think about, we're bringing a new product to market. They're the ones orchestrating how, where, what, legal risks, all those kind of things. And so I started to see the decision-making power they had on what we did, and started to appreciate that career, and thought, engineering never seemed long-term to me, because I just didn't see myself going beyond what I was doing, and no one was developing me that way either. There was also the dynamic that I was an immigrant on a work visa. And so I was on the H-1 visa, which is an employer-sponsored visa. So I think part of the lack of development is that because I was a high-skilled engineer in that field, that's really all they wanted me for. I tease that sometimes. I feel like the work visa is like these golden handcuffs. They're like, what do you mean you want to do something else? You have this H-1B, we want you to do this. Like, we love that you do that. And I couldn't break out of being seen as that. And I just knew the only way to do it was to pivot completely and go back on a student visa, which is how I went back to law school and started. So
now, do you like that transition? Did you like it?
I did. I still
right.
do. I still do. It's been a broader career for me. I still work in product development. So I'm an intellectual property attorney. So I do what I saw.
Okay, I see. All right.
And maybe that's a theme in my career, right? If I'm inspired or I see and I believe that I can be, then I orchestrate and do what I need to do to get there. So I still work with clients and still work with engineers and still work with product development to bring new products and services to market. I tend to do a lot more on the transactional stuff. So think joint development.
Okay.
If two people want to come together and I do draft all the contracts around that to make sure that, the relationship goes well and the development goes well and who owns what after the thing is produced. So that's what I do now.
That's important.
Yeah.
Now, could you describe, I mean, I'm obviously engineer,
Mm-hmm.
lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now as a mayor, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a very diverse background,
I
right?
do.
And career paths, right? Could you just give a little bit of insight on how moving through the different careers has shaped you as a community leader?
Yeah. So I was always a very head down and work person. Didn't really, and I don't want to attribute this to just like immigrants generally, but when you are quote unquote hustling or doing your thing or achieving, it's hard to really absorb what's around you and the pain points or the dynamics of people around you and what it is that they're experiencing and what it is that you have that you can give to solving that problem. The thing is, in community work, our professional work has skills that we can use. The community work that I do is all about advocating, strategy. So in order to advocate well, you got to strategically think through who are the parties that need to be on the table, who has the ability to solve this, how do I bring them together, what are the steps we need to take to execute. So throughout my career, I know how to project plan, right? I know how to build a strategy. I know how to execute on a strategy, right? I know how to advocate. So these are all skills that are, whether it was in engineering or now in law, I have. The difference is I'm doing it for social problems, not widgets, or not people in the sense of corporate people. Like I develop leaders, those kind of things, not that. We're thinking about, hey, how do we solve a housing problem? How do we solve an affordability? These are issues that affect a vast amount of people if we get it right. So that's to answer the question, how does all these vast experiences, it did really take me some time to say, okay, it's not engineering, it's not law, it's these aspects that allow me to do those jobs that I'm taking out to do it in community.
The thing that I'm grabbing right there, a lot of it is those transferable skills, right?
Yes,
A lot
absolutely.
of previous guests have spoken up on, being like, well, I was at a job that I might have not liked, but I try to acquire a skill set that would help me out in the next place. Now, granted, in your situation, all the places you went to, you definitely had a good time at, and you grabbed that information. You were like, okay, it's not just being a lawyer. It's about knowing how to advocate, knowing how to speak up, knowing how to, as an engineer, knowing how to lead a team, right?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
skill sets are now that you're basically packing your goodie bag over here, carrying it to the next space, and then carrying it to the next. You weren't leaving anything behind.
Absolutely.
It's like that newspaper your father would put out, right? Every page had to be read. So you were just collecting those coins like Mario and Luigi in Super Mario. You're like I'm snatching it up. I'm not leaving anything behind because I worked hard to get that, right? And that skill set was only given to me at that present time because I accepted the opportunity.
Yes.
The opportunity was given to me. I walked in, 10 toes down, figured it out, and took it out.
And took it. Yeah. It's you. It's always within you. Absolutely. No one owns your skills. You do.
Now, along the way, I can only imagine the amount of challenges you faced.
Yeah.
Right. And more importantly, like establishing yourself in the upper Arlington, area, both like professionally, personally. How are you overcoming that right now?
So here's the thing. I've lived in my short and long life. I've lived in 8 cities, 4 countries. I've never lived anywhere longer than 7 years. If I make it through next year, Arlington will be the longest place I've lived in.
Okay.
So adapting is something that I now do without even much thought, right? It's just a skill set that's embedded in me. There's a book I like to talk about, First 90 Days. It's a corporate book, and it's about how to quickly get up to speed when you change jobs or change roles or change companies. First 90 Days, and I forget the guy that writes it, but great book. I say what's in that book is how it works is in those first 90 days when you make any change, when you pivot, when you're in a new season of your life, whatever it may be, giving some thought to what you want the experience to be in those first 90 days and finding your people makes all the difference. Makes all the difference. And that work is on you. No one is going to make your experience better than you are going to make your experience.
I respect that.
So after, I think, my first 2 moves, I picked up on that very quickly. And because of how intentional I am about new spaces, new seasons, my challenges are not, I don't see them as challenges. I see them as saying, okay, you didn't do this portion right. Take that as a note on, I need to know this department better. I need to know this person better. I need to work on this better. I need to add this. It's kind of like my transition plan. Yeah.
Okay. You are just slaying away. Slaying away. And you mentioned before you're a mom as well too.
I am.
I have
2. I have 2. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. So my days are.
Yeah,
I wear a lot of hats.
I'm about to cancel the interview and say that, hold on, what's go? How you handling your life? Yo, let me just send the blessings over your way right now, because you are just what?
Oh my gosh.
You are about that life. You are about that life. You are.
First of all, I like to tease that. I like to tell my female mentees, there is no better time than this time to be alive with AI, Instacart. I mean, there's enough technology to help 3x the abilities of the things that you can do. So I don't know that I've seen the inside of a grocery store in like a month, right? I just use Instacart. I just order my groceries, they show up, right? But what a time to be alive. That was not my mom's story.
Yeah. You had to show, she had to show up.
She had to be in the grocery store
line,
picking up the groceries, right?
Yeah.
I can run to the groceries on my phone, be driving to somewhere else. By the time I get to the house, the groceries are there. I take them in. See, I just took that hour out of my day from grocery shopping, right? So I've become a lover of different technologies. Right.
Yeah.
Wash and fold services, like, I mean, whoever invented said, my business plan is going to be washing other people's stuff and folding it, and all they need to do is pick it up. I'm like, take my money. I love you. Thank you. Right. But that also comes from a place of privilege.
Yeah.
I can afford all of these things. Yes, you work for it. And I've explained this to someone before. When I think about the cost for spending on these conveniences so that I can do other things in my life, I do with the intent of, if someone washes and folds my laundry and my family's laundry, what am I using that freed up time to do, right? Am I able to now spend it with my family more and not think about, am I able to actually just sit down, finally cook dinner and sit at the table and eat dinner with them? So I'm very intentional about, if this hour or 2 hours is taken away from me because I'm paying for it, then here's how I'm going to use it. So I'm just very
That's important.
intentional with that
Okay.
in life. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the intention right now behind running for office.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's just talk about that, because what a time to be running for office, right? With
Yeah.
all the things that are going on, and how, again, media is just crazy, how people,
Yeah.
project certain things on people and certain ideas, and it's a little crazy right now, right? But to run for office, like, what
Public
was the
service a little crazy
inspiration
right now.
behind that?
Yeah. So 2018, I made my 8th move in life. I moved to Upper Arlington. I'd taken a new job and moved to a new city. And when I moved to that city, like all previous places, I knew no one. I worked with my realtor to end up where I ended up. And I had a human list, the things people think about when they think about what community they want to be in. I had proximity to work. I didn't want to be too far away from work. My kids were young. My daughter was just about starting kindergarten. My son was almost 2. So I thought, well, I want good schools. I want a safe community with sidewalks and good police, fire, and I wanted like a lively, like Parks and Rec, like things that the kids could do within the community, so I didn't have to go a lot of places to get it.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I say that because it was an intention on the community I wanted to live and the experience I wanted my family to have, and that's how we ended up in the community that we ended up in, which is Upper Arlington. Beyond that, I knew not very much about the city. Have you ever watched Coming to America?
Oh yeah, come on, Eddie. Eddie.
There's that scene where he's in New York. He has arrived. He comes out where he's like, "Hello, my neighbors," right?
And they were like, "Shut up." New York, that's New York for you. That's New York
But
for
the
you.
thing is, because he felt, he did that because he felt it was like so different, and it was like that's how it felt when I got to Upper Arlington. It was so different, Great community, but it is 87% white, right? So my daughter started kindergarten in the community. She was the only Black girl in her kindergarten class, and there are 3 different kindergarten classes, and she was the only one. I want you to hold for a second and think back about the story I told you, the culture shock I told you in Maine, like arriving in Maine for the first time. I was 18 though. My daughter was 5. So she was experiencing that for the first time at 5. It plays out very different in a 5-year-old than an 18-year-old. For a 5-year-old, she came home and she said, "Mom, can you straighten my hair for school tomorrow?" And straighten your hair, like Black people know we don't straighten our hair. And I'm actually from a very natural family. We wear our afros, before I used to have a lot more hair, we were a little puffed. So it was a very odd request for my daughter. And it caused me to pucker up and say, well, what is she experiencing? Or why does she feel like if she had straight hair, whatever dynamic she's experiencing would go away? And so in that puckering up and paying attention to how she was moving around in the community, it took me back to that 18-year-old that was in Maine experiencing culture shock. And I thought to myself in those dynamics, if our community could create different experiences for the community members, for that sense of belonging, we wouldn't have 5-year-olds feeling like this. What I mean by that is, because, I had some people take me to boot, well, Ukeme, like these homes, people buy the home, like it's private markets, like people buy and live here. Whoever wants to buy and live here buys and live here. And I was like, yeah, but when you look at historically, this was a red-lined city. So up until 1970, Blacks and Jews could not live in my city because you couldn't transfer title to Blacks and Jews, right? You've created systems that give us the demographics that we have. That aside, now those are abolished laws and all of that, but we're still living with those abolished laws. You know what doesn't have to be private markets interfering? recruiting. My daughter is not going to see her first Black teacher till middle school. That's not a demographic problem. That's us in government actually choosing. My daughter goes to City Hall. She doesn't see Black people in City Hall. My police force. How many Black people do I have in the police force that is community policing? What is she seeing? What is she experiencing that is within government control that we are not doing? And so you start to be curious and you start to ask those questions and you see that there's work to be done. This was 2018. I say that because the timing is important. Because I start to do that community work and like in my daughter's classroom, making sure she's being exposed, just not for her, but other people also being exposed, her classmates being exposed to, so having them over for play dates, so having them see different things. And 2 years later, 2020 happens. And everyone remembers 2020, not just for the pandemic, but George Floyd, and there was a racial awakening in our world, in our country. And I remember looking at my son, and I'm saying, I am raising a Black son in America. I can rest on being an immigrant all day long and feel very, very grounded in who I am and where I'm from. But that's not my children's story. And I have chosen this community to raise my kids. And this is all they know as home.
This is reality now.
This is reality.
This is their reality.
This is their reality. And if I don't know if you know Hamilton, but there's that song, The Room Where It Happens. You know, no one was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it, okay. And so it was like, being in the room where it happens matters. That's actually the decision-making that trickles out here. So yes, I could be a community advocate all day long. And I did a fair share of that over 2 years. We had our community relations committee that was formed and set up in the city. And I served on, that was the inaugural commission for the city that was appointed by city council at the time. And I served on that founding committee and suggested things that we could do. But funny enough, it wasn't an idea that I thought about myself. I'm doing all this work, and a friend and a neighbor says to me, Ukeme, you do all this community work. Has it ever crossed your mind that the people who actually make this decision are our council members, and they are elected, and you should run for office because you already do this work? And I'd never thought about it. And then I laughed it off because I was like, I have zero name recognition. I've only been in this city for 3 years, no one. And I have a name like Ukeme Awakessien Jeter. It's like,
you gotta say the whole government. Say the whole government.
You got right. Your whole government name needs to be on the ballot, right?
Wait, who we voting for? Looking around the room, who is this person?
So go back to finding your people. I had a core set of 4 people that saw me every day and believed that I could run for office and win. And it started with the belief of those 4 people and setting up my campaign and running it my own way. I wasn't ever going to run it like a traditional campaign because I don't have the liberty or the luxury or the privilege of running it the same way, while also introducing myself to the community and making sure that they knew why I was running. And so, yeah, that was the journey. It was advocating for that one person, my daughter, who then turned out that as I was on the campaign trail and I got to doors and as I heard people's stories and people ended up joining the campaign team, it was a message that resonated because others in the community got it. They felt the same way. They knew that we had to change. They knew we had to be thinking about these things. And so I'm always grateful to the people of Upper Arlington because I didn't put myself in office. They went to the ballot
that's right,
and they elected me.
That's right.
And so I'm empowered by that. I do this work empowered by the fact that people voted for me to do the work.
the story of your daughter, I got to commend you as a mom, just because it shows what type of household you have, where your daughter came to you after she experienced something like that, right? In in other situations, kids can kind of lash out. They can kind of take on that experience and be like, how do I deal with it? And it might come out in a very negative way. She came directly to you and you had an intellectual conversation. You met her right where she was and you spoke to her about it, right? That just goes to show you how the relationship is at the house. It brings me back to thinking of the relationship you had at the house growing up with mom and dad, how you would sit down and read the newspaper together and talk about it and stuff like that, having those intellectual conversations. And think about it, right? An adult speaking to a 5-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And trying to help bridge that gap and being like, honey, let me express something.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes when I joke about it with some of my peers, I say it's like having like the back in the days, the birds and the bees conversation, right? It's not even about the birds and the bees anymore. It's about, mom, my hair, can I straighten it? And you're like, oh my gosh, how do I even express that? How do I say it's okay, but it might not work for you, honey, right? Not when you're here, maybe. Not every day. And if you do it, you gotta do it this way, right? And it just gets into a whole, but why us, mom? Why me? And those kids are so like inquisitive.
Oh my God, right?
They're gonna keep you finish one thing so you're trying to tell me I don't have to put sunscreen on in the summertime, but my friend does, and you're like, honey, we can buy it for you if you really want, and I can put it on you, but you might not need as much as your friend. But why is that? And it's like over and over. But it's fun to even answer those questions because you're at that place where you're actually could inspire and influence someone right then and there. So what you say is crucial. And because you are the mayor, I know you know how to speak very well and navigate through some things. So shout out to you for being an excellent mom. Okay, put a little stamp on you right there.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for, I hadn't really thought about. Thank you. That was a reflective full circle moment for me.
You got to give yourself a lot of grace because again, it's not our reality anymore. It's their reality.
Yeah.
And the reality, the situation, if COVID, for example, I give the pandemic is the pandemic, right? But depending on your age bracket, you were affected in a different way. Everyone's like, oh, it's the pandemic. We're all affected. No, no, no. A 5-year-old kid who had to stay at home and talk to their friends through a computer never did that before in their life. It's not like a college kid who does that, right?
Yeah.
He's been on Zooms or Google Meets before. A 5-year-old kid for the next almost a year, if that was the case. That right there is a totally different experience. And at the magnitude that it could cause, go left or go right.
Yeah.
And some kids and some adults are still affected by that. So I commend you on having that conversation and meeting her head on and kind of getting that going.
Thank you. Thank you.
You did mention about the community relations. You mentioned that, and I said, hold on now. This is some good stuff right here. How did you help like foster and a culture and understand like inclusiveness?
So it's interesting because you hear it said sometimes that in elections it's not the person meeting the moment, it's the moment meeting the person. So when I moved to the city in 2018, there had already kind of been some things that were shifting in the community in the sense that people were really starting, like, the media had come in and uncovered this really dark story in the city where there had been a big swath of the city that was annexed to the city almost like 80 years ago. And that land was owned by free slaves, but they had gotten the land, buried the history that it was owned by slaves, right? Till they were about to build like a new property on it. And they went to excavate. And so the news, NPR, like ABC, everyone would come in. And so it was like a bad PR nightmare for the city before I moved in, right? That people were discovering all the racial undertones and backgrounds that the city had kept on the wraps and not dealt with. And it was a moment where residents were demanding leaders that acknowledge these ills, were making sure that they were eradicated, or at least the very least, making sure that they were thought in history and acknowledged, that they weren't buried. So I say that to say that we had a willing set of community members that were like, we really need to think about this. It now became, what mechanism do we do it? How? And that's where the idea of the Community Relations Commission came about, where it was a mandate from the leaders of the city, so our city council, that says these are going to be your 9 people in the city, that every month, holistically, they're like boots on the ground. They hear what's happening in the community. They understand whether we're doing it through events, whether we're doing it through education, whether I know like right now they do like speaker series, different things like that, right? Bringing different parts of community together to hear and understand each other and have civil discourse. Because what's missing in the world today is civil discourse. We like to say we can agree to disagree, but that's BS actually. That's BS, right? When it infringes on someone's rights or whatever, we don't need to necessarily agree to disagree. We need to hear people. We need to understand them. We need to see that feeling. And that's what this commission was really about, is we're now such a, yes, we're still a predominantly white community. Like I said, 89% is, but the other 11% is very, very, very diverse.
That's good.
Asians, Blacks, right? Jews, Islamic, we've got it all. They're just a minority, 11%. But that said, those dynamics are still there. And spread out. So it's important for the 89% to understand the 11%. And that's why that commission was based. Because what we also know is that the way Central Ohio is growing, we have 2 universities, right? Ohio State University brings in, borders our city. So it brings in a very, very diverse set. So if that population in Ohio State ends up staying and working and living in our city, which is a large demographic for us, we're going to become more and more diverse. And it's incumbent on the majority to understand how to live and coexist with the minority. Yeah.
It's times is changing, because like you said, the number keeps on increasing. Over the many years, and because of a big university like that pulls in people from all different walks of life,
absolutely.
If you're right, they graduate. A lot of people say, well, we're just going to stay in the area, right?
Yeah.
And it just kind of builds to that. A big question I'm going to dive into now is like, what advice would you give to like an immigrant professional looking to break into like leadership roles within their communities? And so, because you have a lot of leadership roles, whether it be engineering, the lawyer, now the mayor. You're in leadership roles. You're face to face with individuals that might agree or disagree, right? And there might be those hard conversations to have. So, what advice would you give to somebody trying to step into those roles?
Yeah, man, I'm not an advice giver, but I will tell immigrants, they need to recognize that. Well, I'll do it in the proverb. I don't know if you ever heard the African proverb that says, till the lion learns how to write, the hunter will always tell the story. And I may have gotten that paraphrase wrong, but the whole point of it is that there's a lot of narratives, stereotypes, things, whether it be accent bias around immigrants, whether it be foreign education around immigrants. And because of that, we tend to try to assimilate too fast or hide part of identities to get along, right? We shrink to get along. And I wrote ImmiGRIT for this particular reason. You know, I wrote a book, ImmiGRIT, because I think immigrants fail to understand the skills that they do have beyond the technical skills. So we're used a lot for our technical skills. I mean, the immigration policies are about that. You come and your form of contribution is that you work. That's the immigrant contribution. But I say, in addition to your technical skills, the fact that you have left what you know familiar and come to another, you have adaptability. It takes resilience to thrive in a new country. You're resourceful. I don't need to know much about your socioeconomics or where you came from to know that to navigate new systems takes resourcefulness. Even if you have, even if you come from, even if you're the king of Persia, you need to figure out what bank you're going to put your money. That's resourcefulness, right? You're going to have to do the research, all that kind of stuff. So I know you're resourceful. And our journeys take a long time. So that's grit. You got to persevere over a long time, and that's grit. I coined these things ImmiGRIT in my book, ImmiGRIT, because that's the skill set that you have in addition to the technical skills that you bring.
And the skills that you're going to acquire by being mentored or seeing certain things, being adapted, being in different environments. So I do hear you on it. And also language as well.
And language as well, right? The fact that you can speak another language, like whether you call it code switching, whether you call it, you know, figuring out the environment, whatever you call it, you are king. You can do that. So if you rest on that, know that, feel empowered by that, right? What it now is about is figuring out what you are, what is rooted in you in advocating. Because I always say community, serving community is a selfless act. It's not about you, it benefits someone else. And as an immigrant, we benefit ourselves all the time, right? We're building for ourselves. We're trying to get our family here, trying to provide for our family, all that, right? And that takes a lot of time, and that's noble and honorable work. Do it. But if you want to, in leadership, whether in the corporate, whether in community, is all about selflessness. It's all about developing someone else. And so to do that, find the things that intrigue you, that you're passionate about, because if you don't, you're not going to be invested in it. You're not going to be passionate about it. And trust that you can do it because you already have those skills. So there's not much advice I need to give to immigrants other than just step up. That's really it. You already got it. Yeah, you need to step up, and you need to have some confidence. You know, I talk to some mentees and they're like, oh man, Ukeme, the accent. I didn't sound like this like 3 decades ago. Inevitably, your accent is going to change over time.
Yeah,
Inevitably. That's the process of assimilation. It's an organic process, right? Your R's may never roll the same way. You may never land a completely the majority accent, but I've been across the United States, and there's different accents across the United States, even within America, right? And so it's just a confidence and a step up. That's really what we need at this point. You got it.
Well, kudos to you also on dropping that gem on the book, right? Right. I think that the book highlights, like, again, the skill sets within ourselves as first or second generation immigrants. And I think that's very important, because people sometimes forget that is something that's important, that you are unique and you are special. And a lot of the thought leaders, the individuals, the guests that I've interviewed have spoken about that. You know, and said that, you know, at first they didn't know it was something unique and powerful, right? But then all of a sudden, once they got further on in their journey, whether it be in corporate or in their own professional occupation, they start to realize that what they would sometimes disregard is now in the forefront. And they're like, wait, hold up. You need someone to speak Spanish? Well, I can do that. I was, come on, right? So to be able to put a book together that kind of highlights these things so that people could constantly, it's like the affirmations and saying you are special, you are unique, you know, utilize this to get ahead. You know what I'm saying? I think that's very, very important. Where could people find the book? That's the next question.
I'm pretty sure my publisher has it everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I hear 70% of books are bought on Amazon, so it's there. It's also there's an audiobook. It's also an Audible, recorded in my voice. In my voice, my full accent and everything. I know. They're like, Ukeme, do you want someone else to record it? I was like, nope, I got it.
That's what I'm gonna say. That come on.
So yes, it's also, and I did that for my mom. The only way my mom was going to read that book if it was in an audiobook. So I was like, this one is for you, Mom. So
Wow. Congratulations on the book.
thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
for expressing about all the things that they could find within your book,
Yes,
adaptability, resilience,
yes,
resourcefulness, like utilizing those key words that especially in those transitions, you're so focused on like, where do I land? That you're not thinking of, if I land, I'm landing with a whole lot.
yeah.
I'm landing with a whole
That's
lot.
it.
Because the a lot was at home. It was where you came from. You're like, I'm leaving things behind. But in actuality, you're actually taking, even if you have one bag packed, that's just materialistic stuff. But what's inside of you is going to help you be successful. And I see that you have utilized all of that along your journey. So kudos, and more kudos to you for just putting in the work and just carrying that goodie bag of clothes and stuff that you needed, but also
Yeah.
keeping your personality, your drive, your ambition, your resilience over here to America, in a sense, to thrive the way you are, and now giving that information to your children.
Thank you. Thank you so
You've
much.
done it. You've done it, and you're still doing it. So,
You're
what
here.
are like some key steps organizations could take to recognize and leverage the strength of like talented immigrants like
Mhm.
yourself? And
Yeah.
it's a very
Um,
competitive environment. Like, how can these companies do this?
well, the first thing is leadership development programs have to change. 90% of leaders are still white. And
Okay.
what that means is that how we develop leaders is still through a very specific lens. So cultural intelligence, for instance, is usually not something we think through in our leadership development or appreciate or understand or know how to leverage. So I encourage a lot of cultural intelligence training, leadership development programs, and kind of like this cross collaboration where you have immigrant leaders and you have the native leaders learning from each other. Here's the thing, 1 in 5 people in the workplace by 2035 is going to be an immigrant. Markets are already global. So our marketing strategies have to be fluid, change, all of that. Salsa outsells ketchup. You cannot have the same marketing strategies in different markets. And so it's not even a nice thing to do. It's necessary to do if you're going to maintain any market share in developing your immigrant leaders. And so leadership, how we do leadership development and how we elevate them to leadership is important. And then the second thing is allowing them to lead, right? To lead in their way. I usually do an exercise where I ask, well, how many executive leaders do you have that have given presentations company-wide with an accent? It's always kind of like, we expect our leaders to sound and act a certain way, right? And that has to change. We got to let people lead how they lead. We can't orchestrate leadership to look a certain way. So I think those two things, I think corporations start doing those two things, and we start changing the dynamics of leadership.
Wow. Kemi, thank you from the bottom of my heart and the Zaka community for just taking the time to be present, to share these stories, to be very vulnerable and open, sharing the hardships, but also, the wonderful parts about your life, whether, and I see throughout the whole journey, there's always moments in the hardship that you were like, you know what, it's not that bad after all, right? And you actually kept pushing. And I just want to let you know that you definitely are the pilot now. You are the pilot right now. I'm gonna drop it right now before we leave off. I'm letting you know that you have. I know you said you wanted to be a flight attendant before, but now you are the pilot. And you know what? There's a lot of people on that plane with you. every
Aw.
day traveling, right? That are with you, that trust you, that believe in you, because the pilot is the person, right? When people are on that plane and hello, how you doing, guys? Want to let you know we're gonna be flying off destinations, and you are that person now. So you might not have a plane around you, but I want to let you know your office is your plane, and you are the pilot. And I just want to let you know, hopefully, I can be that co-pilot with you, and we can fly together.
Thank you. Think about that. Don't make me tear up on the show. That's beautiful. I actually will tell
I,
my daughter that.
that's right. You better go back and you say, look, Uncle Paul said something today. Because
Well, thank you.
personally, I gotta call it how I see it, right? And I'm when I'm in these conversations, I'm listening, but I'm really listening to what's not being said, and I'm like, you know what, Paul? I think she's a pilot right now. I don't think she
Yeah.
understands that she is a pilot. So that little girl who was like, I just want to be a flight attendant, and then years later, years later, your daughter says, why don't you just want to be the pilot? And you're like, good question, because I never saw anyone, but you are that person now.
Yeah.
And someone's gonna look at you and say, I want to be that pilot.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That blessed me. Thank you.
That's gonna be the next book.
It's gonna be the next. That's how it starts. I mean, I didn't think I was gonna be an author, and then there was a student that said, "Hey, I think you should write this book," and then you never know.
Congratulations. And I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like me, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.